Welcome to Live Life in the Spirit. We are your hosts. I'm Pastor Penny Schulz.
And I'm Kristen Scharrenberg. We know you struggle with some sort of temptation. Everyone does. So what's yours?
What trials are you facing right now that kind of seem beyond what you can carry? The book of James has some fascinating insights into how we can be empowered over these temptations and trials. Tune in today to find out how you too can break free from the chains that are holding you down.
Join us as adventurers through God's Word, the Holy Lands, and beyond, exploring the fascinating and the weird, the difficult and the obscure. Come and see how the stories are woven together and how they still apply to our lives today.
We promise to bring you joy, hope, inspiration, and intriguing out-of-the-box thinking, and ultimately salvation through Jesus Christ.
Well, we thought today would be a really good day to look at temptation. You know, that's not something we like to talk about. We get a little queasy and squeamish.
Uncomfortable.
Yeah. And trials. Nobody likes trials. And maybe right now you seem like you've had more than your fair share. And sometimes it can be really tempting to find an escape to get out of those trials.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, we thought this would be a really good idea to see what the book of James has to say to help us through those times of temptation and trials.
And I like James, his perspective, and also where he comes from and what perspective he offers, because who is James?
Well, James is not the brother of John.
No. Well, there is a James that's the brother of John.
But not
that's
the one
not who wrote the book.
He is actually the brother of Jesus. And if you look just a few more books down the road, you have Jude, who is also another brother of Jesus. A lot of people may not realize that. So here's something interesting, that they were not part of the 12 disciples.
No.
But obviously they become one of his staunchest supporters.
Absolutely.
And apostles. Afterwards, they go out and speaking to, and James is actually speaking to the Jews, not to the Gentiles. He's speaking to those who have been scattered among the four corners of the world. So this is what James has to say.
Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance.
What was the first line?
Consider it pure joy when you face trials of many kinds. I can't say I've ever thought to consider it pure joy.
So what's he saying at? Are we supposed to jump up and down and go, yippee skippy?
I would say that this would be a good time to talk about the difference between happiness and joy.
Exactly. We confuse the two.
We do.
It's kind of like love. You know, English has one word that means a whole bunch of meanings, where you look in Greek and stuff, like they'll have 4 words that mean love, the different aspects. Same way with joy. That whole yippee skippy.
Today's a great day.
There's more happiness, and it's based on our circumstances.
Right, it's very situational.
So how can you have joy in trials? Well, it's because the joy is what comes from deep within.
Down in the depths of our heart.
Where does our joy come from? Right?
Absolutely.
It comes from God and His Word, not from our circumstances.
Right.
Because
sometimes our circumstances aren't very joyous. That doesn't mean we can't have internal joy in them.
Especially when we're facing trials.
Yeah.
But it says, because you know that testing of your faith produces what?
Perseverance.
How many here have ever thought about that one?
I feel like praying for perseverance would be ranking right up there with praying for patience.
That's right.
And this is really honestly saying that, because testing it is the way you get it.
You know, if you pray for patience, be very careful, because God's not going to give you patience. He's going to give you opportunities to improve and to work on that patience. And same way with here. Produces perseverance, which means you're going to have trials in order to persevere.
And if our faith is never put to the test, if we've never experienced one difficult thing in our entire life, then are we really relying on God?
Probably not.
Because we didn't need to.
No,
because we
did
weren't
it
going
ourselves.
through anything that didn't require his intervention. So it is true that really until our faith is tested, we don't know how deep it runs.
Well, the next part says, let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Okay, so do we really think about that? That perseverance is actually what matures us?
No.
So if you go through trials and you don't persevere, if you just give up, if you just look for alternative ways to get out of it quick, you're never going to mature, are you?
No. And if you think about it, that's quite true, because that ability to stick to things that are difficult, to not give up when things are hard, that does show maturity.
Well, it goes right along with this, and complete. Okay, so what does that mean? You were just talking about this when you said, if things weren't hard,
we wouldn't need to rely on God.
And we're not complete unless what?
We are fully relying on God.
And then if we do that, it says we really won't be lacking in anything. So if we have the joy that's way down deep in our heart, that's built on solid ground, which is Christ, it will mature us. It'll complete us. And we really don't need anything else. Which also gives us the hope.
Oh, absolutely.
That at the end of this,
that's where the light
will come out. It's that fire. It's that refined by fire. They say either you're going into the fire, you're in the fire, you're coming out of the fire, and it's a continual loop.
So then it goes on to say, if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you.
So of all the things that we're supposed to ask God for, how many of us actually ask for wisdom?
Well,
especially in this day and age, we're living in prosperity teaching. Everything is, just empower yourself. And because you have the Holy Spirit, you're going to get everything you need. You want that boat, you want that house, you want...
Not everything you need, everything you want.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, we're not going to go there. That's a whole other subject. But what's he saying? We're not supposed to ask for those things. We're supposed to ask for what?
Wisdom.
And guess what? If you have the wisdom, you're going to know what to ask for, aren't you? Because everything's going to be so much clearer. It will. It'll be a little easier to know what to ask for in this trial or in this temptation.
Oh, and I love that it gives generously to all without finding fault, because we're not going to come really probably deserving even wisdom. But if we ask for it, he will give it to us.
Well, he knows if you're struggling, because you're in those trials, you're in those temptations, whatever, you're at your lowest anyway. He's saying you don't have to be perfect before you can ask for that wisdom. He's not going to find fault with you or even what you're doing if it's the lowest of low. If you come and you ask for wisdom, he will give it.
Right, because then he knows we're asking for his help.
Jesus said in Matthew 7:7-8, this is one of my favorite passages. He says, ask and it will be given to you, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and the one who seeks finds, and the one who knocks, the door will be open. I kind of have a feeling that James was standing around when his brother was talking about that.
I think you are absolutely right.
So if we seek it, it's not just a flip it.
Right, and it's not like a one-time, oh, hey, God, if you could just kind of let me know what's going on, that'd be great, and then you go on.
If you're seeking for something, you're putting energy into it. You're diligently looking and digging for the truth or digging for help. It says anyone who seeks finds. So he gives us that hope. It's the promise that if you're actually diligently seeking it, you will find it.
Right.
And anyone who knocks,
the door will be opened.
It says, but when you ask, you must believe and not doubt. So there is a catch. You may say, nah, it's kind of an odd catch. But when you really think about it, is it? Because how many times do we come to God in prayer? And we go, God, I really need you to take care of this situation. And then the last part of it is, but I know it probably won't happen because who am I? Or you're too busy. Or I prayed this prayer before and nothing happened. It says anyone who doubts is like a wave of the sea. It's blown and tossed in the wind. You're double-minded. You are unstable. I love those words. We already know you're unstable. You're in trial. You're in temptation.
We're looking for that foundation.
Yes. He's saying just don't doubt. Know that if you ask and you seek, you will find.
Right. Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him.
So this is kind of the thing right here that shows you what the reward is. I think we confuse a lot of things with salvation.
Mm-hmm.
Our salvation is not based on our trials or our temptations or our works.
No.
No. It's solely and purely on the grace and the mercy of God. But we're not supposed to do, the problem is a lot of Christians will they become saved and they accept Christ and they don't change their ways and then they just coast through life.
Mm-hmm. They live as they were before, but I'm good.
Right. They're not doing those acts that we're supposed to when we're in and through Christ. What he's saying is those who have been tested, who have stood that time under trial and have persevered, that they will receive the crown of life. And we always talk about this, the jewels that are in the crown, because that's ultimately the prize that we're going for. And Paul talks about that. We don't go for the jewels here, the baubles on this earth.
Right.
It's for what matters in the kingdom of heaven. I like what James has to say in verse 13.
I do. So when tempted, no one should say, God is tempting me. For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. Because how many times do we want to say, or have we heard people say, that God is putting me through this, or God is, there's a difference between allowing and causing to happen.
Or if you remember Flip Wilson, if you're that old, it was always the devil made me do it, Mm-hmm. The devil doesn't make anyone do anything.
No.
He can present the opportunity, and God can allow that opportunity to be presented, but what we do with that opportunity is completely and totally dependent upon us.
Choice. We have a choice.
Free will.
So each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. Then, after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death.
And that's that whole thing. We are sinful people in need of a Savior, that we know that the wages of sin is death.
Mm-hmm.
So James is just reiterating what Paul has said and what basically Jesus has said and Peter has said. They're all saying the same thing, right?
It must be important and true.
We can't do it on our own, in our own sinful state. We looked at that last week. It says because the person's heart is evil from the very beginning.
Right.
And right here, it's our own evil desires. It's
right.
our own enticements. Mm-hmm. Which gets to be interesting because what is the enemy going to tempt you with? Something that you don't care about?
No, things that you already struggle to say no to.
And we know that each of you struggle with different things. We all have different things. Not everybody is tempted with cigarettes. Not everyone is tempted with alcohol. Not everyone is tempted with gambling. Not everyone is tempted with sex. There's all these things that we think of as the big no-nos. Mm-hmm. But we all have our own vices.
Oh,
and sometimes they're not some of the main ones that we kind of think of.
Right.
But they're still temptations nonetheless.
And they still can cause damage and lead down that road. So in 1 Corinthians 10:13, it says, "No temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man."
So right there you have it. Paul's saying, you know what? There ain't anything that you're going to be tempted with that hasn't already been over and over and over and over by millions of people. But what?
God is faithful.
And
he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. But with the temptation, He will also provide the way of escape, that you may be able to endure it.
This is my banner verse because everybody always says, oh, God will never give you more than you can handle. And that's not scriptural. Of course he will allow more than you can handle. Because if you could handle it,
You wouldn't need him.
you wouldn't need God. But he says he'll never give you more temptation than you can handle, because he will provide a way of escape. So he doesn't say he's going to keep you from all temptation. But when temptation comes, and you can't endure it, when you pray and ask God to help, he says, I'll give you a way of escape, so that way you can endure. And I can testify to that, when I've had things that tempted me so much, and I would actually pray about it, and God would just immediately take that desire right out of my heart. Now, I could still choose to go ahead with that, but the desire was gone.
Right.
There again, I had free will.
Of course. Always.
So some of the common things that we think of, what are those temptations?
Well, I think probably the top ones that people think of are any addiction of any sort. So pornography or sex, alcohol, drugs.
How about cussing, gossiping, taking the Lord's name in vain? Stealing, lying, cheating. Those are just some of the things that we think of that are really tempting.
And I would also put food on that side of the fence. I think more and more in the mental health field, it is huge.
Oh, I know it is. I just, people automatically go to that. So stealing. Okay, we think about, we're not talking about bank robbers here or carjackings.
No, which is not good.
What about kleptomaniacs? Mm-hmm. What about just even the thrill of snatching something?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, grabbing a pack of gum and putting it in your pocket when you walk out the door, or I don't know. That thankfully has never been a temptation of mine, so I struggle with.
Or how about lying? Even if we think it's for the right reasons. But the problem is, like, when you get to lying big time, if it's habitual,
that really can become then. Sometimes people don't even realize anymore that they're not telling the truth. And it can really destroy people and families and...
Well, and it's very stressful, because once you start telling lies, you have to remember what lies you told, so you can tell more lies to cover up the first lies. And then before you know it, you don't even know what you're talking about anymore.
I think they sometimes even lose sight of what the truth really is. Yeah.
It can be really tempting to cheat. Now, what are we talking about? Well, it could be cheating on spouses, but it could even be cheating on a board game.
Mm-hmm.
Or who hasn't cheated on homework at some point in time.
Or
it
a
becomes
test,
very
or...
simple to then, okay, this is my way out. I don't have to rely on anything else. I can just cheat my way through. But what about some of those uncommon ones that we don't think about? How about our phones, computers, TV? I thought about that. Those are things that our ancestors, our great-great-grandparents,
they did
never
not
had
have to worry about.
But that poses a whole new realm of temptations.
Oh yeah, because you used to have to work a lot harder to find things you weren't supposed to do.
Or see, it wasn't so readily available.
Oh yeah, and it is at your fingertips 24/7.
How about, okay, so everyone usually think of phones and computers with pornography, but how about shopping?
Oh, huge addiction.
And it's just
Amazon,
right there.
right?
It's popping up. You don't even have to talk about it anymore. You can just think it.
It seems like, oh look, there's some things that was there. That's creepy.
The other problem with the temptation of the phones is if you don't want to engage in someone in a conversation, I'm even thinking spouses or kids with parents, instead of sitting at the table or on the couch talking, what are we doing? We're on our phones. We can even have the TV going at the same time, which then puts the other one on the computer if they don't like what's on the TV or the phone.
Right. And we, it's been interesting because that's a rule we set at our house, is that we don't have phones at the table, because I didn't want to fall into that. And I tell you what, my kids will hold me accountable if the phone rings and I go to answer it without thinking and they're like, no phones at the table. Okay, yeah, because we don't even think. I mean, it just is, it's a natural part of what we're doing all the time.
It's become an extension of our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
What about books? Now, for some people, this isn't tempting, but for others, you can either get so engrossed in book after book after book that you check out, or what are you reading?
Either one can be a problem.
Yeah. So we mentioned food.
Mm-hmm, definitely.
What were you going to say about books?
Well, I was just going to say, I think of all of those things as a means of escape.
Mm-hmm.
And on their own, they don't have to be bad. Now, granted, the content, that can be part of the temptation. But then just, I don't want to deal with life. I don't want to deal with this situation. I don't want
that person.
Right. So I'm just going to, or I don't want to deal with how I'm feeling. So I'm going to escape in something else for a while.
You know, you wouldn't think for adults that this would be so big, but it's becoming huge. Video games.
Oh, huge.
Because it is an escape. Again, it can be a hobby, but when it becomes, you get home from work and immediately go right to the video game, and you're talking with everybody else, and you are ignoring the people that you live with, getting immersed in that. Maybe not paying the bills or doing the chores around the house or working on stuff because, no, this is me time. Me time is great if it's
in balance.
But when everything's me time, then yeah. We said food on the other side, but I was kind of thinking sometimes we don't think, we joke about it. Mm-hmm. We don't think about food or like chocolate or the other stuff that could be tempting. Well, it's just M&Ms. You've seen all the memes on Facebook about, oh yeah, leave the lottery ticket there, but if you put M&Ms, the ball's going to be gone. You know? Because it is so tempting, and it's just a little bit, it's just candy. It's just, and it can be not just overeating, but it can be under eating that temptation.
Yeah, it can really become about control.
And not liking ourselves.
Oh, absolutely.
Not liking what we see and not appreciating how God has made us. We're all different. We all have different body styles. Well, what about hobbies? What would that look like if that's a temptation or a trial?
Well, if your spouse had a hobby that took every waking moment of their time not spent at work,
going golfing, going fishing, going hunting, going shopping,
gone.
Yeah. That could be one of them. Or how about constantly buying new hobbies, but never finishing the ones you have? See, when people ask me if I have hobbies, I say crafts. I say, oh yeah. Oh, wait a minute. Did I say I do crafts or do I own crafts? I have a lot of things that have never been finished. It's a temptation to want to start something new while not finishing
what you had before.
And then sometimes that's because it's a trial. Right?
It was difficult.
But when you do something and you do persevere on that, the rewards. I think of my grandma, and I have talked about this, but it just blows my mind. She used to crochet. And she can have a whole thing done and realize that something's not quite right or she did something wrong. And instead of working with it and just making it work, she'll rip the whole thing out. And I know she's not the only one. Most people who do that they'll rip, even my daughter, who does knitting and all different stuff, she'll rip the whole blanket apart and start over.
And you're
just
like,
because.
Why would you do that? That sounds horrible.
You got more perseverance than I do. Well, how about friendships?
They can be trials.
They can be. It could be temptations.
They can.
Maybe they can be just like we said with TVs and phones and hobbies. If we're using that so that way we don't have to do something else, if we get on the phone or we, go see, that's all great.
If it becomes an escape from life in an unhealthy way or in an unbalanced way.
Or they can be trials.
They can.
Same way with families.
Oh, definitely.
And it can be tempting to want to chuck things. Like, I think of this with marriages, and that's what's so frustrating. When going gets hard anymore, it seems like a lot of people, they have so many means and ways to check out, to get their needs met
elsewhere,
then the marriage is no longer the priority, and that's how people drift apart. When I do premarital counseling, especially for the new, young, excited people, I look at them and I say, remember to always treat your spouse like your second marriage. And they will look at me. And I've had so many people that have come to me, and this is their second marriage, and I know things happen. But they're so giddy, and they're just, they treat each other so lovingly, and they're just falling all over and doing what they can for them. And I've even checked on them years later, and they're doing the same thing. And I'll say, what would have happened if you would have treated your first spouse the same way you're treating your second one?
Mm-hmm.
Again, I know life gets in the way,
For
and
sure.
things happen, and it takes two. But sometimes the reason why we're not treating our spouse that way is because we've allowed these other things to interfere. It's so tempting when things are tough to ignore those issues and not talk to one another and work things out when I have another escape.
Mm-hmm.
And we just let that build. You hear people say that after they have empty nest syndrome. That's when they get divorced. Why? Well, we don't have anything in common. Why do you not have anything in common? Why are the children the only thing you have in common? Because you got married before
those kids.
Well, hopefully you got married before you had kids. So you need.
There
to
should have
that.
been something there that you continue to build on.
Yeah, and you're going to change, and you're going to grow, and things are going to be different.
But that doesn't mean they have to be bad or wrong.
No, it's growing together. Well, it can be very tempting to not want to go to church.
100%.
That can happen to me too.
Am I calling sick today? No, you're the pastor. You have to be there.
But something as simple as not reading the Bible. So tempting to use that time to be on your phone, to be on Facebook,
Watching TikTok videos.
clean the house, do whatever. So you're not reading your Bible. You're not taking that time to pray. How about anger? Do we think of anger as being tempting, a temptation?
I do now. I've seen it differently, I suppose, over the last year in other people in particular. It's much more of a choice as far as what we do with that anger. The feeling itself is neither good nor bad, but what we do with it for sure.
James talks about all of this, and it kind of gets summed up in one word. How we handle temptation and how we handle those trials, and I would say it would be integrity. And what is integrity?
Doing the right thing when no one is watching.
So I think a good way to demonstrate that, when we talked about what you're looking at your phone or the books you're reading or the movies you're watching, if you're doing it in the privacy of your own home, would you do it in the sanctuary of the church with people around?
Ouch.
Or would you do it in front of your family?
Yeah. Would you want your mom to know that you're doing that?
Yeah, that's a good one. And when we get caught, because we've succumbed to those temptations, and we've done what we shouldn't have, and you say you're sorry, are you really sorry for what you did?
Or are you sorry that you got caught?
Well, here's the difference. If you didn't get caught, would it have stopped you or caused you to change direction?
Right. If not, then you were just sorry you got caught.
Well, that happens with speeding tickets. Sorry, I'm so sorry. Why they say keep the speed down and yeah, if there hadn't been a cop around and you look down and you see you're going way too fast, do you automatically slow down?
Or do you go,
Yep, no cop.
I'm good.
Keep going.
So we've been talking a lot about temptation and all the different kinds of temptation. And it's easy to, for some things, it's easy, stealing and cheating might be a little bit easier to tell if it's a big deal, if you've, hidden $5 million somewhere.
As opposed to taking a pen or a paper clip from work.
Right. Which our kids at youth group had a really hard time understanding that analogy.
Paperclip.
Why would you steal a paperclip? That doesn't make sense. But Jesus talks about why this is so important. So it is not what goes into the mouth that defiles a person, but what comes out of the mouth. This defiles a person. Do you not see that whatever goes into the mouth passes into the stomach and is expelled? But what comes out of the mouth proceeds from the heart, and this defiles a person. For out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false witness, slander. These are what defile a person. But what we put in 100% works on and change and gets in there and impacts our heart, which is then what makes it bad.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's what makes it tempting, because for some people, if they don't know that they're being tempted by it until they just watch it or do it once, and then it's that draw, that allure that just gives you keep coming back and back and back, and then out of the heart, that's exactly what your mind's going to be consumed with, and your thoughts are consumed with.
And the enemy is certainly aware of that.
Oh, you betcha.
And so if you have a little inkling towards something, or a little bit of a predisposition for something, or something that's already a bit of a problem for you, the enemy will latch onto that and be that little whisper in your ear telling you all the reasons you should, and making it that much more difficult.
So I guess that's what James is kind of getting at, is he knows this. He said there is no temptation that is not common to man. But what has that got to do with integrity, and how does that kind of work with the trials and stuff? It's how we deal with it. We're all going to be tempted. How do you deal with those temptations is ultimately where your integrity comes from.
100%. Because it's tested when no one is watching.
Exactly. So how are you handling being left alone with maybe something on TV that you know you're not supposed to watch? Are you going to shut it off and change the channel, or are you going to go, well, nobody's watching, and continue? Or if you saw money fall out of a person's pocket right above in front of you, but nobody else saw it, and you pick it up, are you going to run up and tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, I think you dropped this? Or are you going to go, up, finders keepers, losers weepers?
Yeah, there's so many times and ways that it's simply what's in our heart that impacts our decisions.
And well, we think that nobody is watching, but
who's always watching?
Yeah, God's always watching. He knows what we're doing.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, even if we have done that, of course, we've all succumbed to temptation. But he always gives us a way out, and he gives us a way to ask for forgiveness. And I like that even Jesus knew this. Again, James and Jesus were brothers. He heard a lot of this stuff, and that's why Jesus included that in the Lord's Prayer. It's all about God's will. It's all about the kingdom being here on earth. It's give us our food, forgive us, and lead us not
into temptation.
You don't have that many elements really in the prayer, but yet that is a big one. Lead us not into temptation.
And deliver us from evil.
Because he knew that he would. Jonathan Cahn has a perfect little daily devotional part in his book of mysteries that he talks about the door. And I love that analogy, because he asks, what's more alluring, the thing that's so tempting that's on the other side of the door, or the door?
Right.
And if you think of a big, ugly, wooden, black door, that's not very tempting.
Right.
But that's not what you want. You want what's on the other side.
Right.
But he's saying if you can stay away from the door.
Right. Yeah, just focus on not even getting anywhere close to that door.
Then it's not so tempting anymore.
Right.
I think of a bakery. I don't know why that always comes to my head when I think of the door. I'm sure for other people it might be the vape shop, or it may be the liquor store. I don't know what would be the tempting, but for me, bakery always came up, and you see the case in front.
Well, you have to give it a wide enough berth to not smell.
You just, they have that big glass window, but you can't get to the stuff through the glass window. You have to go through the door. You just have to think of a big ugly door and not a pretty shiny glass one. Just stay away from the door.
Yeah. And that's true, because it is a lot easier to resist. So circling back to the beginning, when we started with James, Consider it pure joy whenever you face trials of many kinds. And we've talked about what that looks like as far as joy in trial a little bit. We've certainly covered temptation in many different forms.
But what does all that produce?
Perseverance.
Perseverance, which is supposed to mature us.
Boy, that's tough.
And complete us.
Can I be
Maybe that's where the joy is.
Like, can I be complete and immature?
As my grandfather always had a sign that said, growing old is mandatory, but growing up is optional.
It's true. I think there's balance. You can be mature and still have silliness and lightheartedness and joy. Yes.
And laughter.
Laughter's good. And that might be a really good segue.
You're going to say that?
What?
Might be a really good segue.
So I think this is a good time for Joy Break. So we're going to try something a little different today for our Joy Break. Penny is great at thinking on her feet and always has this the show must go on mentality. So we're going to put it and her to the test today. So we were talking one day about different things we could do for our Joy Break, and we said it would be fun to update some of the parables that Jesus used and make them more current. So I'm just going to throw out a parable and see what Penny can come up with.
Okay.
Oh, the parable of the sheep and the goats.
I don't know that I have anything funny for that.
Well, what's the story?
It's dividing the sheep from the goats. Mm-hmm. But I never understood that one because the goats are used at Yom Kippur and they're supposed to clean animals. But I mean, it's the sheep are the Jews and the goats are not. But it's like, but they're using goats for the Jews. I never really completely fully understood the parables. The funniness of that. It was like, I don't even want to be a sheep or a goat. They both stink. And sheep are dumb.
Goats are annoying.
They are, and they're noisy, and they eat everything.
They really do. How about the Good Samaritan? That's not a serious one. Can I try my hat at it?
Mm-hmm.
I think they just saw him on the side of the road and they called him an Uber and they went on their merry way.
Yeah, but that isn't really how the parable goes. The first guy came by and went, ew!
Like a little girl. What would you do if you saw someone on the side of the road that was bloody and beat up? I'd probably puke.
Yeah. The other guy goes, oh, he's wearing rival colors. I ain't touching him.
Right.
He can just lay there. I don't really think he's dead. Maybe he's dead. Let's walk on by.
He's only mostly dead.
Nothing to see here. Nothing to see here.
They would probably phone it in. They would, or they would say, I bet somebody else already called.
Somebody else
already called. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's so funny though. That's just sad.
Mm-hmm. So we know that the Good Samaritan had to be a farmer. Somebody from the Midwest, just saying.
It's true.
Yeah. They'll pull over
and stop
and they'll check it out.
Mm-hmm.
They may pray about it first, going, should I? Is this okay? But then if they get the family, then...
Or I will call. Like if I'm not sure that I should stop, but I still worry, I'll call 911 and just say, hey, I think there's someone that might need help, but I don't feel comfortable, stop. Mm-hmm. When you're in Alaska, it's the same thing. Because there might not be anyone else that goes by.
911, what's your emergency? I'm being attacked by caribou!
Yeah, that's not funny. That's a true story. I'm driving on ice! Also a true story. You don't know.
Melting!
No, I was frozen.
Yeah. Let it go. Let it go. I've heard the story several times.
Yeah.
So.
Thankfully, there's never been any story you've told more than once.
No, never. I have so many that I could just keep. It's tempting to make those parables more relatable. So what do you do with that?
So, after attempting to modernize the parables of Jesus a little bit, I think it's good to really get back into the topic and talk about what do you do with that?
So now we want to get kind of serious today on the what do you do with that? Because we know that this struggle is real. I mean, we all face temptations, but some have struggled way deeper than others. It has caused from poor decisions to really bad decisions in life. It has affected not just you, but others as well. Maybe your family members. It could have affected your career. Could have affected your freedom.
Could have gone from a minor problem to something you just can't even see your way out of anymore.
Maybe you are at a point right now where you have had enough. You're fed up with it. You know this is a behavior that you do not want to do. It's wrecking things. And you've desperately tried to stop. Mm-hmm. You've tried to quit, whatever that is. And you have not had any success. It just keeps pulling you back in. Or maybe you have had success, but that temptation is still reaching out and grabbing, and the more success you have, the harder it's grabbing and trying to pull you in. See, the enemy is never going to tempt you, really, with something that you don't care about.
Right. It's going to find the things that you struggle with the most.
Right.
And
or you think that you may have an issue with. I mean, chocolate's not a thing for me. Mm-hmm. You could put me in a whole room of chocolate and I'd be like, yuck. I mean, not that I won't eat chocolate, but it's not tempting. It's not a lure. But I don't gamble. And the reason why I don't gamble, I just feel like that would probably be a really big trigger for me. Mm-hmm. And so I don't go near the door. Just don't even go there.
Right.
You know, if you like alcohol, but stealing or smoking or whatever is not your thing, they're not going to tempt you with that.
Right. They're going to tempt you with an open bar or a free drink from...
Or all the friends, come over and bring your six-pack or your case.
Yeah.
Again, we're not saying that drinking is bad. We're just saying that...
All of these things, well... Some of these things are bad all the time, but a lot of them it's about moderation or balance or whatever. And if you don't have the capacity to do that, it can really and truly become a
If it is
problem.
tempting, you can't just have one. It leads to multiple ones then you're totally wasted. And that's not where you wanted to be. You thought you had it in check.
Right. So, I think of someone who maybe has been through, who's an alcoholic and has gone through AA and has worked the program and has, 20 years under their belt. You'll hear about people that all of a sudden out of nowhere, they relapsed. And it's hard to understand how that can happen. And yet it does so easily. And
depends on what the trial was that they were going through at the time.
Absolutely.
And what does the enemy do? Puts the temptation in front of you when you're at your weakest point.
Right.
To try. But the cool thing is with that, so they relapsed. But that doesn't have to be where it ends.
No, it does not. And it is often a part of recovery. And it can be a minor blip. And they can get back on track and rework some of that. But recognizing that, okay, that trial was something I hadn't been through before, hadn't recognized, or wow, I was feeling pretty confident and I had conquered that, I thought. And it can happen that you just are caught off guard, and that's where the enemy's going to step in.
Or I've seen people that have taken it so far that maybe they were a drug addict, and now when it comes time for, they're past all that. But when it comes time for surgery or something, they're so afraid, or they broke a bone, of becoming addicted again that they will not take any pain medicine or anything because they're so afraid of becoming addicted again. I mean, those are some of the severe things.
Well, and I also think that the other thing that we have to keep in mind, and at least I've seen it often in mental health, is you can take that unhealthy habit and refocus that onto something healthy, but then that in and of itself can become the addiction. So maybe it's, let's take it to the ultimate healthy extreme. Let's say it's exercise. And rather than like someone who is focusing on what's good for their health, all of the time and energy that was spent on drugs before is now spent on gym memberships and running and clothes and shoes and every other thing. And you're spending just as much time doing that healthy thing. And it really becomes about...
Or it's a control thing. It's no longer about just being healthy.
Right.
It's about, I can't get thin enough. I can't get buff enough. I can't get, I'm addicted. It's one thing you do. Your body then craves that. If you're not exercising and you're not in it, that's fine. That's good. But when you take it to the far extreme.
Right. Yeah, there's balance is such an important piece.
Well, it's the same way with eating too. If you've had an eating problem before and then all of a sudden you start going to the extreme of not and sacrificing everything and withholding whatever to where you just dwindle away to almost nothing, but yet that's how people struggle with anorexia and bulimia all the time, because when they look in the mirror, what do they see? They don't see the skinny person that's in front of the mirror. They still see their old self.
Or it becomes about, so food can become that replacement. We talk about an escape. Food is a huge escape for a lot of people. I am anxious and stressed, and I don't know what to do with these feelings. So I'm going to eat some of those M&Ms that you were talking about earlier, and I'll feel better for a little bit. And boy, I want to keep feeling better. So, oh my gosh, I just ate an entire family-sized bag.
And then how do you feel?
Yeah. And you're disappointed in yourself, and it's this horribly uncomfortable roller coaster that you can get on and get really stuck in. Culturally, what do we do when we celebrate?
Eat everything. Everything is eat. You eat when you're pressed, you eat when you're happy, you eat when you're
I can feed any emotion. I got a food for that, yeah. And then it really becomes a different way, a form of escape, because we don't want to have to deal with what those feelings are.
And I think about with relationship too, we immediately want to go to the cheating or the pornography, but it starts subtly. You don't just wake up one morning and go, oh wow, I think I'm just going to go have an affair because that person looks hot or cute. That's not how it happens. It's because there's struggling going on in the marriage. Maybe one of the spouses is checked out on their phone all the time, or gone, or disengaged, or not fulfilling the core needs. A lot of that's emotional. It's that connection. And so you start looking for that connection, or it finds you. Again, the enemy is going to tempt you with that. And I'm not saying having a friend, even of the opposite sex, is bad outside of marriage. But when you start confiding in that one and you start looking to them to fulfill and meet those emotional needs, that's the number one reason why people start having affairs. Is it starts with the emotional.
Sure.
When the other person's not absent, physically or emotionally or mentally, or and one we don't think about, another way that you could be tempted to have control over that spouse is to withhold sex from your spouse as a means of, getting back or having the upper hand. That's not what God has called for any of this. Any of these things that we take and we try to substitute or try to use for control or use for manipulation or use to check out of life.
Right.
Or to use for substitute.
They're a cheap substitute anyways.
And it's not the temptation that's bad, it's what you do with it.
Right. Absolutely.
That is. How about gossiping? We don't think about that very much. But that can destroy lives. It can destroy a church. It can destroy.
And it's different than it used to be. Because, and I've talked about this with my kids a whole heck of a lot, because I'm one of those parents that doesn't allow them on social media, even though there's a lot of kids younger than them that are doing that. Because when I was a kid, if I made a mistake or if I did something stupid, I mean, because let's face it, when we're kids, we do stupid things. Like my little group of friends in the high, and maybe a larger group in the high school at large would have found out about it, and they might have talked about it for a little bit. And then a week later, someone else did something stupid and the world went on. Now, with social media, someone cannot even do anything. But there can be a photo or a video or a clip that's taken out of context, and it can ruin.
Or just even something's messaged and gossip, like I think even back when there was the big gossip started with the party line. Now this is going way back for some of you, but we lived out in the country, and when I was just a little bitty kid, we still had party line. Everybody, it was like you picked up the phone, and everybody that was on that circuit
could hear
what was going on, and that's how the gossip started. Well, then later, when everybody had their own individual call lines, but you would call up and say, "Hey, did you hear?" Or it would go that way, but it still stayed pretty tight and narrow.
Right.
But now, with social media, and now everybody's friends with everybody.
Oh gosh,
to put anything out there.
And people are, and I would say that is another temptation and another, I don't know, almost an addiction. But people are anonymous behind the keyboard, and they will say the most outrageous things, even sometimes in the name of God.
Mm-hmm.
And people can be crushed, shattered. I have seen so many people on social media get on and talk about the kind of impact those things has on them and has on their families, because it doesn't go away. No. I mean, one person hears about it and shares it with the right group, and now 1 million people are commenting on it
that know absolutely nothing of the situation. They're just feeding off of
that anonymity and some little meme or some little clip that caught their attention, and they don't know. So that, and I mean, the damage that can be done,
It's really severe, and we've already seen that. How many people have committed suicide?
Mm-hmm.
Because of cyberbullying or something, whatever.
Yeah. Because it doesn't go away. It continues to cycle back in the next cycle. I mean, it's bad.
Well, which then kind of works into anger.
Sure does.
It's really tempting to get angry with, not that anger is a bad emotion. I mean, we're going to have it, but it's what you do with it. But the temptation is to constantly blow up and go off the handle at every little thing.
To give into that in a unhealthy or dangerous
or a control way. Like if I'm the one that's blowing up, then I'm the one that, I had mentioned before about the temptation of not going to church because I just don't feel like it today, or we were up late last night, or we got a birthday party later in the afternoon, so somehow that affects not going to church in the morning. Or, you look at that and it always starts out, they always say it just takes 3 times. I would say sometimes say more, don't even take that. But if you quit doing something 3 times in a row,
you've broken that habit.
You just don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes that much more
effort
to go. Yeah, effort to go.
Mm-hmm. And what are the dangers? I think my son, bless his heart, at 15 is asking questions about everything these days. And one of the questions that I got this week is, why do we go to church? And he genuinely he's trying to figure it out. He wants to know everything there is to know about life. And sometimes those are answers.
He also didn't like the integrity thing either, about being sorry, but just being sorry that he got caught.
Possibly might have touched a nerve on that one. And we'd also talked about it in youth group. But that all aside, I think it really made me think. And it's conversations that I've had with friends and family members and church family over the last several years, because I've questioned what's the purpose of church? Why do we need church? And people think,
what hurts if I don't go?
Right.
I still believe in God. I don't need to go to church
And that's dangerous. Mm-hmm. And first of all, that whole fighting temptation thing, we need people around us
to hold us
accountable. And that's what we're called to do.
Well, we need to be in the Word, because if you're not going to church, I can pretty much guarantee that everyone that says, well, I don't need to go to church to believe in God. Yeah, but are you reading your Bible? No.
Right.
Are you praying daily? Nope. Probably. And what are you watching? Oh, I am watching on TV. Okay, but who are you watching? And how do you know that who you're watching is speaking from sound biblical advice?
Right.
Are you really getting your weekly dose, if nothing else, of what God has to tell you?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I thought it was really cool. We had a gal who was a visitor this last Sunday. And now here she's not from this town. She could have been, she was visiting a friend. It would be very tempting, right? To go, I go to church every week. You know,
Right.
I don't need to go this time. And her particular church had already started, so she missed that, her denomination. And so she was looking at other ones she could go to, and they had all started. And ours was late enough, because I have two churches, the second one, that she could catch it. The temptation would have been not to go, but she was convicted that she was gonna go to church. So she didn't bring her friends, so it would have been even more tempting to go, well, it'd just be easier to stay there.
Right.
But she was bound and determined she was going to go to church. And so she did, and it just so happened that what we were talking about was exactly what she needed to hear, and God had convicted her. She would have missed out on that. She would have missed out on God speaking directly to her heart, giving her the encouragement, giving her the, you know, you're on the right track. Here's the tools for your toolbox.
Mm-hmm.
She wouldn't have gotten any of that if she would have chosen to just
sleep in or hang out and have a late breakfast with her friend or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But that hour that she spent in church, it made a difference.
It did. And that's part of when we talked about the jewels in the crown, you know?
Yeah.
You can believe in God, and if you've accepted Christ, that is your salvation. Going to church, not going to church is not going to affect that salvation. But
it'll certainly make the journey here on earth a heck of a lot better.
A lot easier.
Yeah.
It is.
And that's the other thing that I told Chris was that for me, I can't imagine getting through life without my church family. It didn't matter when I graduated and I went to college, when I was living on opposite sides of the country, that home church that I grew up in, if I had a need, if I had a prayer request, if I was struggling with something, I could call and I could ask anytime, day or night, for that to be put on that prayer chain or to connect with that group of people. And it didn't matter. They were there and they supported me have my entire life. I can't imagine not having that, you know?
You know, with all these temptations that we have and all these trials that we go through, how we look at it, how we deal with them, how we live our life is based on who we're grounded in.
Absolutely.
And where our joy is. I love these shirts that we have on, and we wore these today. They are from The Chosen. It's Mary Magdalene, who says, I was one way, and now I am completely different. But where's the catch?
And the thing that happened in between was him.
And who's him?
Jesus.
Jesus. You know, we've all been tempted. And maybe some of us have been caught in a life that is not where we should be. But we don't have to stay there. No. That's what she says. She says, I was one way.
And she was.
Didn't have to be. And now I am totally different. And how can you have radically opposite ends? Because of one thing that happened in the middle. And that thing that happened was Jesus. And that's why we're doing this today. Because we're all tempted. We're all going to be tempted. We're all going to fall short. We're all sinners.
Absolutely.
We're all needing a Savior. But it doesn't have, as we did last week, it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to stay that way.
Right.
Jesus is that middle piece
that allows us to go from one way to being completely different.
So we hope that maybe this has touched you in a way, that has convicted you, not offended you, but just empowered you to maybe get past something that you've been struggling with.
And to just know, take heart.
Jesus, I've
overcome the world.
So with that news of joy, until next time.
Shalom.